All right, so this is Meze's best product by a significant margin. It's the Empyrean 2. Now, is it something that I personally enjoy? We'll talk about it. Okay, let's dive right in and talk about the Meze Empyrean 2. And just a disclaimer here, this is a demo unit sent over by Meze for review. Big thanks to Meze for sending it in. I do not get to keep this unit. And of course, I haven't been paid to say anything in particular about this headphone, and all thoughts and opinions here are my own. Now, there is a lot to talk about with this headphone, and I'm going to try to be particularly thorough with this one, but for an additional perspective, I'm going to link in the description a video on the same headphone from DMS over on his channel. Go check out his perspective as well, because it's important to get viewpoints from more than just one perspective, from more than just one person. So, the Empyrean 2. For a bit of context here, I wasn't the biggest fan of the original Empyrean or the Elite. I think they had their strengths, but they both had this kind of warm, bright sound signature that ultimately I didn't find to be competitive with their asking price. Say what you want about all the subjective stuff or the technicalities, if you will. I didn't find those two headphones to be all that competitive for their asking price along those dimensions either. But it has to be said that these headphones, including the old ones, have some of the best build quality and ergonomics of any headphone on the planet. Like, these are some of the best built and most well-designed headphones you can find, period. And so they absolutely have to be commended for that. But with the Empyrean 2, the improvements that Meze have made here to the acoustic performance are substantial, enough to where it is deserving of a significant amount of praise, depending on the type of sound signature that you are after. And I'm going to make an analogy here to two other well-known headphones here for different reasons. One of them is going to be with the Sennheiser HD800S. The other one is going to be with the Odyssey LCD2F. It's going to sound totally weird, but by the end of this, I think it'll make sense why this is kind of like both of those headphones. So with that out of the way, let me dive into the sound quality here right away. Well, I'll talk a little bit more about some of the rest of the stuff with this headphone a little bit later on, but I want to get to the sound quality here because there is a lot to cover. And once again, if you find this stuff valuable, if you like what we're doing here, let us know by hitting that subscribe button. It really helps us out. It's an indication that what we're doing here is actually what you guys want to see. And if you're already subscribed, well, thank you. Here's a smile for you. So taking a look at the graphs here, once again, this is a new way of visualizing these measurements, and I'm showing you guys here both the raw and the compensated measurement. So what you're looking at here is, in fact, the same measurement, just that this one here is calibrated to the measurement rig's DFH-RTF. And I've done a whole video on this. If you're interested to learn why this is the most important view of the data, there'll be a link to that in the description. Definitely check that out. But I'm showing you guys also the raw measurements here with the preference boundaries, just to help folks who are used to reading raw measurements kind of understand what's going on as well. We've wanted to do this for a long time, and now we can. So here are both, essentially. So let's take a look here. And the first one I'm showing you is the Meze Empyrean 2 with what I'm calling here the hybrid pads, because this headphone comes with two sets of pads, and the one that's on here by default has both a leather material on the bottom side and kind of like a suede material on the top side. So I'm calling it hybrid because it's kind of like got two different materials. It makes sense to me. And the pads do make a difference, but for the hybrid one, what you get here is essentially a headphone that is kind of like the Sennheiser HD800S, just a little bit more V-shaped. For the bass, you can see that it's actually quite a warm presentation with a bass rise that kind of is a bit forward all the way up to 300 hertz. And I do think that this can come across, extra thick. If you want really clean sounding mid-range, this is an area where too much presence can mask some of the harmonics that exist in the mids and in the upper mids. So this is the first area that I kind of tinker with EQ. I'll show you guys that in a minute here as well. It is well extended generally, and the bass is also quite present, giving that same kind of warm, lush presentation that I think a lot of Meze headphones are known for. And then for the mid-range, it's just a bit pulled back in comparison, a bit relaxed, and then it has that dip right at around 1.5K that you also see, again, with the Sennheiser HD800S. And then for the treble, here's the other point of comparison with the HD800S. Things are generally good here. They're a little bit on the brighter side because it's, like I mentioned, a bit V-shaped, but the key piece here is there's a peak right at around 6K. So what does that mean? Well, if you're not bothered by the 6K peak on the HD800S, for example, then this probably isn't going to bother you as well. Unfortunately, I am particularly bothered by the peak at 6K on the HD800S, and I'm bothered by it here as well. So that's immediately what I notice right away when I'm listening to this headphone, and it's the first thing that I drop down. Now, I am also quite sensitive to that region, both for over-ear headphones and for IEMs. I'm very aware when there's an elevation there, and so right away, this was something that, you know, it came across a bit too strongly for me, and I killed it. I killed it with fire. It's not that bad because the rest of the treble is actually quite smooth. It's just elevated along with that 6K peak. So what I do here is I drop 6K with a narrow Q peak filter, and then I also give it a bit of a downshelf for just all the treble, basically. And not by a lot, because, again, it's fairly even throughout. It's a fairly consistent response for the treble, just that it has that 6K elevation. But importantly, this overall is a massive, massive improvement over the frequency response that you get with the first Empyrean, the original Empyrean, and also the Elite, because it doesn't have that crazy upper treble peak. And the distance between the upper treble and the mid treble is not like totally out of whack. It is a little bit more V-shaped, yes, but it doesn't have the kind of warm, bright character that the original Empyrean had and that the Elite had. And in that respect, I imagine for the folks who love the original Empyrean, because I know you guys are out there, you let me know all the time, you hate me for not liking the original Empyrean. You let me know all the time that you love it, and I think this is different enough that I don't know if it's going to be the kind of thing that fans of the original would want. This one doesn't go as far into Flavor Town as the original Empyrean and the Elite. And while I think this is a massive improvement over the original, there are, of course, going to be people who prefer the original. And so I just want to let you guys know that this is much more normal than what you might be used to. And so you have to keep that in mind, I think. Still, it's not without its quirks. Like I mentioned, if you're sensitive to the 6K peak, then you're probably going to notice this as well. But if you like the way the HD800S sounds, this one's going to do just fine for you. And it's actually just a straightforwardly better HD800S because you don't have the distortion issues in the bass. And actually, with that in mind, the harmonic distortion for the Empyrean 2 is extremely low. It's very well controlled here, to the point where I'm testing these. Usually when I'm running the measurements here, I run them at around 90 dB, 95 dB, something like that. I ended up also running this at 110 dB. And the distortion is still kept under control at 110 dB. To the point where you're never going to hear it. Like, this is a headphone where, like, you could very easily, you know, crank it to the max, blow out your ears, and go completely deaf before you'd hear any harmonic distortion. So for people who want to do that, you know, and I know there are people out there who do like to do that, this is a good candidate for you. Now, moving on here with these other pads, these are the suede pads that also come with the headphone. The tuning is essentially the same, just without the bass lift. So it's just a lot brighter overall. So for our resident science enthusiast Blaine, who enjoys headphones that are bright as the sun, the suede pads are the way to go. He might be buying this headphone. That's why I'm letting him know. But actually, in saying that, the suede pads, because of the way that they sort of taper off in the bass, it actually is easier to EQ, or at least it's easier to EQ with just a bass shelf, if that's what you want to do. Or if you just want to use shelf filters, the suede pads may be a good candidate for that because you don't have to make as many peak filter adjustments and notches throughout the mids, essentially. But of course, I obviously did some EQ with this headphone, as I recommend people to do with every headphone. And for that EQ, I've been using the hybrid pads here. And when it comes to EQ, this is the reason why I am making another analogy to the Odyssey LCD2F. The Odyssey LCD2F, that is a headphone that is really well known for having ultra low distortion, where you can essentially adjust it to your heart's content, and you're not going to run into harmonic distortion territory. Same is true for the Empyrean 2. This has very low harmonic distortion. You can have all kinds of fun with EQ with this headphone. And so the strengths of the LCD2F are here as well, just that the Empyrean 2 has a much more normal sound signature compared to the LCD2F. So just keep that in mind, that it doesn't sound like the LCD2F for its tonality. It's just that you can do similar things the way you can with the LCD2F, okay? So I added a sub bass shelf by a significant amount here, and it handled it no problem. I also then reduced the upper bass and lower mids a little bit, just to get it a little bit cleaner through the mids, and then reduced the lower treble to my preference, and then killed the 6K peak. That's essentially what I did. So what you're looking at here is the end result that I ended up with, and it was very easy to do didn't run into any harmonic distortion issues like I mentioned, and this is an excellent candidate for EQ. I recommend using this as a starting point because my preferences aren't going to be your preferences, my HRTF's not going to be your HRTF, and certainly you have to adjust this stuff by ear above 5K. I mean, it varies throughout, of course, but above 4 or 5K, you're going to see a more significant variation there. Now, there's one other thing that I want to mention here with the graphs, and it has to do with what happens when the seal breaks. And the reason why it's important to show this or talk about this is these headphones have cups that are quite long. They're not quite as long as like what you get with the egg-shaped Hi-Fi Man ones that stick down below your jaw, but they do still, like when I put it on here, I'll show you. They do still protrude down low enough below your ear to where it could break the seal, depending on the shape of your head and how the coupling is for you. And if it does break the seal, the resonance frequency for this headphone is reasonably low, but it's not as low as what you get with some of those egg-shaped Hi-Fi Man headphones that have, the massive drivers. And with those headphones, it's not an issue because the resonance frequency is so low that even if you break the seal, the bass actually goes up on those headphones, and you don't feel like you're missing out on, the low frequencies. With this headphone, it's okay, but because the resonance frequency here is a little closer to 300 hertz, if you do break the seal, it can lead to a lack of bass response at your eardrum, right? So you're not going to get the same bass response if the seal is broken down low. So that's why I recommend if you're wearing this headphone and you hear it's missing bass or something like that, try readjusting and moving it around, and try wearing it so that the bottom part here doesn't stick down below your jaw. Because I think if you wear it too far down on your head, you could break the seal and then the bass will drop a little bit. It's not going to drop out like completely, because it does still kind of, go on a little bit, but it can be lower than what you might want. Thankfully, for both sets of pads, the foam density here is extremely compliant, meaning that you shouldn't have issues with glasses because it'll just sort of, contour around the arms of the glasses, and the seal shouldn't break there. The only thing I noticed was that sometimes the seal would break down at the bottom. But okay, that is how the Empyrean 2 performs acoustically. Let's now talk about how it sounds subjectively. Let's talk about the subjective parts of the experience. And for the most part, it is also good. I think the biggest advantage to the Empyrean 2 over the originals is in that overall sense of clarity that you get from an increased level of ear gain. So the information between like 2 and 4K is much more present. And it was, quite subdued on the previous models. Now, some people like that. I'm not saying that's bad if you prefer that. I'm just saying that this is going to have a lot more clarity compared to those models. But in terms of some of these intangibles, what are the qualities that stand out? Well, first of all, instrument separation is fantastic on this. Clarity for trailing ends of tones is also excellent. And once again, the sound signature here, at least for the mids and for the treble, is pretty similar to what you get with the Sennheiser HD800S. And as a result, the soundstage or the spaciousness effect is also very good. It's a very spacious and open sounding headphone. I think a lot of people are going to receive it that way too. In particular, I found that this effect created a really good sense of lateral definition, where it is not quite as good as some other headphones, is in that sense of physicality, impact, dynamics, that sort of thing. I find this to be overall a bit more of a softer presentation in comparison to what you get with headphones like the Utopia and the Clear and stuff like that. And so if you're the kind of person who doesn't like planar magnetic headphones because they tend to be more like this, this isn't going to change your mind. The last thing I'm going to say about the technicalities here is that I do still find this to be a step behind some of the, top dogs. I do not find this to have as good subjective characteristics as what you might find with a LCD5 or a Susvara, some of the, super high-end headphones that are out there. But I absolutely do find it to be good enough. And for people who are scoring very heavily for spaciousness, that soundstage effect, instrument separation, that kind of thing, then this is absolutely competitive with the very best of them. Now, as far as drivability, these are fairly easy to drive. I could run it off of basically anything that I wanted to. You do not need a crazy amplifier for these at all. So don't go thinking, yeah, I need to go spend $3,000 on my amp and my DAC to pair with my $3,000 headphones. You can run this off of far more modest equipment. Now, just a note here on the looks and the build and the comfort. As I mentioned, this series, They're some of the most comfortable headphones that you can buy. They're some of the most well-built headphones that you can buy. And the Empyrean 2 does not disappoint at all. I think this is not only better feeling in terms of the material choices that they've gone with here, even though it's pretty similar, but also better looking because it's all black with the matte black for the cup here, and just with a little bit of a silver kind of tinge here. And everything that I loved about the original's design, its mechanical and industrial design, is here as well. Like just the way that this slides in and out. Oof, I could do this all day. Maybe I will. You get the carbon fiber for the headband with this head strap. It does look a little bit weird when you're wearing it, but that's a price that I am willing to pay. Like the wings, that's a bit weird, yeah. But yeah, for the comfort, it's outstanding. I could wear these all day, no problem. Obviously not with a hat. So let me give a conclusion here. Is the Meze Empyrean 2 worth it? Well, if the idea of a slightly more V-shaped HD800S with Odyssey LCD2 capabilities sounds good to you, then yes, it is worth it because I don't know anything else that's like this. With that said, I think if you're not into a V-shaped sound signature, if you like something a little bit more even keel, like more neutral sounding, then this might not be the one for you. If you're sensitive to 6K or just treble in general, this also might not be the one for you. And again, I have a hard time thinking that any headphone is really worth $3,000. But is it competitive? It is certainly far more competitive as a product than anything that Meze has done in the past with all the rest of the headphones that exist in this high-end segment. So no longer is it just about the amazing build quality and the comfort and the industrial design here. This now also has acoustic performance to also make it competitive. So much so that it is a headphone that I would be perfectly happy owning and enjoying and just being done. Like, this is one where I very comfortably own it and just not care about headphones anymore. And I think in part because it is one of the few high-end headphones that is really quite comfortable. Is it the absolute end-all be-all for acoustic performance or subjective qualities? No, I'm not going to say that it is. I don't think it is. But I do think its acoustic performance is good enough now. And even though without EQ, it's not one that I would choose, I do think that a lot of people are going to like this one. So yes, I do recommend it. So that is all I have to say about the Meze Empyrean 2. Once again, if you're interested in the measurements of this or just additional discussion on this, that is linked in the forum in the description below. For any of our written material, check us out on headphones.com in the audio files section there. And also join us on Discord. That's where you can chat with me, tell me that I'm wrong, and hang out with other like-minded audio folks. Until next time, I'll see you guys later.